She asked to be his wife for one night, a widowed woman in a cowboy's Wild West fate. Clara walked slowly along the dusty streets of the small western town. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the wooden buildings, the empty storefronts, and the dirt roads that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the chill of the evening wind, and tried to ignore the stares of the townspeople. Being a widow was not easy, and in this town people were quick to judge anyone who lived outside the expectations they had set for themselves. Clara had learned to move quietly, to keep her head down, and to work hard to survive. Yet, despite her caution, life had begun to feel unbearably lonely. Her small home, a simple wooden cabin on the outskirts of town, was neat but empty. The memories of her late husband still lingered in every corner. The rocking chair he loved to sit in, the worn table where they had shared meals, and the small garden he had planted that still bloomed, despite her lack of attention. Clara missed him every day, but she also knew that grief alone would not fill her stomach or keep her safe in a town where fortunes were made and lost quickly. She had to find a way to live, to keep moving forward, and to protect herself from the dangers that often lurked around the edges of the Wild West. As Clara walked through the main street, she heard the familiar sound of a horse's hooves striking the dirt. She looked up and saw a lone rider approaching. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes, making him seem both mysterious and formidable. His horse was strong and well-trained, moving with a confidence that suggested its rider was no stranger to the dangers of the open plains. Clara felt a flicker of curiosity and caution at the same time. She had seen men like him before. Cowboys, drifters, men who lived by their own rules. But there was something about this one that made her pause. The man slowed his horse as he reached the center of town. He tipped his hat slightly in greeting, though his expression remained guarded. Clara studied him carefully. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of calm in his movements that spoke of experience and resilience. She had learned over the years that appearances could be deceiving, but something about the way he carried himself suggested that he was a man who could be trusted, at least until proven otherwise. Clara's heart beat faster, though she was not entirely sure why. Perhaps it was the loneliness that had made her feel so vulnerable, or perhaps it was the subtle hope that the stranger could bring some unexpected change to her life. She decided almost impulsively to approach him. "Evening," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "You're not from around here, are you?" The man's eyes, dark and thoughtful, met hers. He shook his head slightly. "No, ma'am, just passing through." "Name's Jake." "Clara," she replied, offering a small nod. "Just passing through, huh? That usually means trouble in a town like this." She hesitated, then added, "Or maybe opportunity." Jake smiled faintly, a quick curve of his lips that seemed almost hidden under the shadow of his hat. "Maybe a little of both," he said. His voice was calm, steady, and somehow reassuring. For a few moments they simply stood there, two strangers in the fading light, neither quite sure what to say next. Clara felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. She knew that the Wild West was not a place for the faint-hearted, and yet something about Jake's presence made her feel, for the first time in a long while, that she might not be completely alone in the world. Clara had a bold idea forming in her mind, one that she knew was unusual, even risky. She had never been a woman to follow the expectations of others blindly, but this idea was unlike anything she had ever considered before. Her life had been hard, filled with loss and struggle, and she had learned that sometimes survival required creativity and courage. She decided to speak, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "Jake," she said, drawing his attention back to her, "I need to ask you something. Unusual." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Unusual, huh? You've got my attention. What is it?" She had rehearsed this in her mind, though no rehearsal could fully prepare her for the moment. "I want you to marry me, just for one night." Jake blinked, clearly taken aback. He had expected many things from the townspeople, from strangers passing through, but he had never expected a proposal like this. For a moment he said nothing, simply studying Clara's face, trying to understand whether she was joking, desperate, or entirely serious. "You want me to marry you for one night?" he asked finally, his voice calm but incredulous. Clara nodded. "Yes, I know it sounds strange. I know it's not something most people would understand, but in this town a woman alone is often at risk. A one-night marriage could protect me, and it could help you too. I'm honest about my intentions. This isn't about love, at least not yet. It's about survival." Jake was silent again, considering. He had spent years wandering the plains, trusting his instincts and making decisions based on what was practical and fair. Clara's request was certainly practical, but it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Yet there was something in her eyes, a mixture of determination and vulnerability, that made him pause. He did not see manipulation or deceit. He saw honesty and courage. "Why me?" he asked finally, his voice quiet but firm. "Why not someone else in town?" Clara shrugged slightly, though her eyes remained serious. "Because you're a stranger. You're not tied to the gossip or the expectations of the town. You don't have anything to lose, and I trust that you'll understand the practicality of this arrangement. I feel like I can trust you. I can't explain why, but I do." Jake studied her for a long moment. He could see the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength that had carried her through years of hardship. He had met many people in his life, cowboys, outlaws, farmers, and townsfolk. But Clara was different. She was neither naive nor desperate. She was calculating, honest, and brave in a way that he respected deeply. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured. "All right, Clara. I don't know what the future holds, and I don't usually make decisions like this, but I'll consider your request. Tell me everything you want me to know." Clara felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She knew that convincing Jake would be only the first step. They had to navigate the practicalities of their unusual arrangement, and they would have to deal with the reactions of the townspeople, who were always quick to judge anything that seemed out of the ordinary. But for the first time in a long while, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger could help her find a way forward. Not just for survival, but for a life that held possibilities beyond the loneliness and hardship she had endured. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Clara and Jake began to talk, their conversation flowing naturally despite the strangeness of the situation. They spoke of the challenges they had faced, the losses they had endured, and the dreams they still held in their hearts. They laughed quietly at shared observations, and they listened carefully to each other, discovering common ground that neither had expected. By the time the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, a bond had begun to form, fragile, tentative, yet undeniably real. Clara realized that her one-night proposal was not just about survival. It was about connection, about trust, and about finding someone who could understand her in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. And Jake, the lone cowboy who had wandered from town to town, realized that perhaps he had found someone worth caring about, someone whose courage and honesty could change the course of his own solitary life. In that quiet, dusty town, under the glow of the fading sunset and the first stars of night, two strangers began a journey that neither of them could have predicted, a journey that would test their courage, challenge their assumptions, and ultimately reveal the unexpected power of trust, honesty, and human connection. The night had grown darker and the town had quieted down, leaving only the soft sounds of the wind through the wooden buildings and the occasional creak of a loose sign swinging in the evening air. Clara and Jake still stood near the center of the town, their conversation continuing long after the initial surprise of her proposal had settled. The unusual request hung between them like a delicate thread, fragile but full of potential. Clara looked at Jake, her eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and vulnerability. She knew that what she was asking was unusual, perhaps even risky. Few men would agree to such an arrangement without suspicion, and she did not blame them. Trust was not given lightly in the Wild West. It was earned through actions, patience, and honesty. Yet something about Jake made her believe that he might understand her, that he might see the practicality behind her request rather than dismissing it as foolish or inappropriate. Jake studied her carefully, his mind weighing the risks and the reality of the situation. He had traveled through countless towns, met countless people, and yet few had ever approached him with such honesty and courage. Most people either feared him, tried to impress him, or sought something from him. Clara was different. She did not flinch, she did not exaggerate, and she did not attempt to manipulate him. Her request was simple, straightforward, and grounded in necessity. "I need to understand," Jake said finally, his voice calm but firm. "One-night marriage is unusual. You've explained why you want it, but what do you hope to gain beyond safety? I need to know exactly what I'm agreeing to." Clara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I know it sounds strange, Jake, but in this town a woman alone is often vulnerable. People assume things, judge quickly, and sometimes take advantage. By being married, even if only for one night, I can protect myself from suspicion and unwanted attention. I can move freely without constant fear. That is what I hope to gain." She paused, then added softly, "I don't expect love, at least not yet. I just need someone I can trust for a short time, someone who will respect me and my situation." Jake nodded slowly, understanding the practical reasoning behind her words. He was a man of experience, someone who had learned to make careful decisions in a world where one mistake could cost everything. Clara's explanation made sense, and he could see that she was being honest and sincere. But the question remained, could he agree to something so unconventional without it affecting his own life? "You're asking for trust," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "That's not something I give lightly. You have to understand, Clara, that even a one-night arrangement carries consequences. People talk, rumors spread, and once it's done, there's no taking it back." Clara nodded, her expression serious. "I understand, Jake. I've thought about that. I know it could change how people see me. But I've lived my life carefully, and I'm willing to face the consequences if it means I can protect myself, and I believe you are a man who will respect that choice." Jake studied her for a long moment. There was something in the way she held herself, a quiet strength that he admired. She was not desperate, not pleading, not trying to charm him into agreeing. She was simply stating her needs and asking for a fair chance. He had met many people in his life, but few had ever approached him with such clarity and courage. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it. One night. But you must promise me that we will be honest with each other, that we will respect this arrangement, and that we will not let it turn into something it's not. Understand?" "I promise, Jake. I'll be honest." "I'll respect our agreement, and I'll trust you to do the same." With that, a quiet understanding passed between them. The unusual arrangement was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a plan. They spent the next hour discussing the details, practical matters like where the small ceremony would take place, how it would be witnessed, and what the town would see. They laughed quietly at the absurdity of some parts of it, but beneath the laughter was a growing respect for each other's intelligence and resourcefulness. Clara could see that Jake was not just agreeing out of obligation or curiosity. He was considering her request carefully, thinking through the consequences, and choosing to act with integrity. That realization gave her a sense of relief she had not felt in years. For so long she had felt alone in the world, carrying her burden silently. Now, for the first time, she felt that she had found an ally, someone who could stand beside her, even for just one night. As the night deepened, they moved to a small, quiet chapel at the edge of town. The building was modest, its wooden walls creaking under the weight of years, but it had a sense of peace that Clara found comforting. Inside, the air was cool, and the faint smell of old wood and candle wax filled the room. They were met by a kindly local priest, a man who had served the town for decades and who understood the complexities of life in the Wild West. When Clara explained the situation to him, he listened patiently, nodding with understanding rather than judgment. "I will help you, child," the priest said finally. "Sometimes life requires us to make arrangements that others may not understand. If this is what you need to protect yourself, then I will assist." She had expected skepticism or disapproval, but the priest's calm acceptance gave her courage. Jake, too, seemed relieved. He had expected resistance, perhaps even ridicule, but instead they found support from someone who understood the harsh realities of life in the town. As the ceremony began, Clara and Jake stood side by side, facing the small gathering of witnesses. The priest spoke gently, his words formal but filled with compassion. Clara felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She was stepping into an arrangement that was unusual and uncertain, but she also felt a sense of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, she was making a choice for herself, taking control of her life rather than letting fear or circumstance dictate her path. Jake stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. He was not the kind of man to be easily moved by sentiment or ceremony, yet there was a quiet respect in the way he treated Clara. He did not mock her request, nor did he treat it lightly. Instead, he approached it with the same careful consideration he applied to every challenge he faced in life. That respect mattered to Clara more than she could express. After the ceremony, they stepped outside into the cool night air. The town was quiet, the only sounds coming from the distant howl of a coyote and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Clara felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, excitement, and a cautious hope. She had achieved what she had set out to do, yet she knew that the night ahead would be full of unknowns. Jake broke the silence. "We've made our choice," he said quietly. "Now we face the consequences together, even if only for a short time. Are you ready for that, Clara?" "I am ready, Jake. Whatever comes, I will face it with honesty and courage." And so, under the wide, starlit sky of the Wild West, a widow and a cowboy began a night that would change them both in ways they could not yet imagine. Their arrangement was simple in its intention, yet complex in its emotional depth. It was a night born of necessity, but it carried the seeds of trust, respect, and an unexpected connection that neither of them had anticipated. As they walked back toward Clara's cabin, they talked quietly, sharing stories of their pasts, their losses, and their dreams for the future. They laughed softly at shared observations, and in those moments they discovered a bond that went beyond the practicalities of the arrangement. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something meaningful, a connection forged in honesty, courage, and mutual respect. By the time they reached Clara's small cabin, the first hints of dawn were appearing on the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. The night had been long, filled with careful planning, conversation, and quiet reflection. Both Clara and Jake knew that the true test of their unusual arrangement had only just begun, but they also understood that they had laid a foundation built on trust and honesty, a foundation that could carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As Clara prepared for the night, she felt a sense of calm she had not experienced in years. She was not alone. She had someone beside her who respected her, who understood her needs, and who was willing to face the uncertainties of the world with her. Jake, too, felt a rare sense of connection. He had spent his life wandering, cautious and self-reliant, but now he realized that trust and partnership could exist even in the most unexpected circumstances. The night stretched before them, full of possibilities and unknowns. Yet for Clara and Jake, it was also a night of empowerment, courage, and quiet hope. They had taken a bold step, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they faced it together, even if only for a short time. In the heart of the Wild West, two strangers had found a way to navigate a harsh world with honesty, respect, and the beginning of something extraordinary. The night had grown deep, and the small cabin on the edge of town felt warmer than the chill of the evening outside. Clara had lit a few candles, their soft light dancing across the walls, casting gentle shadows that made the space feel cozy and intimate. The flickering flames reflected in her eyes, and she could see in Jake's face the same mix of curiosity, caution, and quiet respect that had drawn her to him in the first place. It was a strange arrangement, certainly.
Both of them understood that.
A one-night marriage, entered into for practical reasons, was not how most people built connections, yet there was an honesty between them that felt rare and comforting. Neither was pretending, neither was hiding behind social masks. For Clara, it was the first time in many months that she felt safe enough to truly relax in the presence of another person. For Jake, it was an unusual pause in a life that had often been lonely and solitary. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table, sipping water and sharing a simple meal. Bread, cheese, and salted meat, the kind of food that sustained travelers and settlers alike. Clara had prepared it carefully, trying to make the night feel ordinary despite the extraordinary circumstances. She wanted this moment to be more than just a transaction. She wanted it to carry a sense of connection, even if fleeting. "I never expected life to bring me to a moment like this," Clara said softly, breaking the quiet. Her voice had the calm of someone who had endured much but still carried hope. "I've lived through loss and hardship, but I never imagined I'd be asking a stranger to marry me, even for a night." Jake looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Life has a way of surprising us," he said. "Sometimes it puts people together in ways we don't understand. I've wandered a lot, met a lot of people, but I can't remember ever meeting someone who asked something so honest. It's brave, Clara. I respect that." She had expected judgment, skepticism, or even amusement, but not respect, not from a man who had clearly faced his own share of challenges. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not for her status as a widow or her practical needs, but for the person she truly was. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of their pasts. Clara told Jake about her husband, the man she had loved and lost, the small joys they had shared, and the hardships she had endured after his death. She spoke without bitterness, but with honesty, recounting both sorrow and strength. Jake listened, nodding occasionally, his dark eyes thoughtful. He shared fragments of his own life, tales of wandering across plains, working hard to survive, and facing challenges that often tested both courage and morality. It was a night of revelations, but not in the dramatic sense. There were no grand confessions or intense declarations. Instead, there was the subtle, quiet intimacy of two people sharing their truths, of opening themselves to understanding and acceptance. Clara felt a bond forming with Jake, fragile yet real, built on honesty and mutual respect. It was a connection that transcended the peculiar nature of their arrangement. At one point, they stepped outside onto the small porch. The night air was crisp, and the stars stretched across the sky in brilliant patterns. Clara gazed upward, feeling the vastness of the world and the smallness of their place within it. She thought about the life she had led, the struggles she had faced, and the hope she still carried. "Do you ever wonder if there's more out there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. More than survival, more than wandering or getting by, something that makes life feel fuller? Jake leaned against the railing, his eyes on the stars. Every day, he said. I spent years moving from place to place, trying to do right, trying to survive. But sometimes, I feel like there's a connection waiting somewhere, and we just have to find it. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a place, maybe it's just a moment that changes everything. Clara felt a shiver of understanding. That was exactly what this night was. A moment that could change everything, even if it was brief. She realized that her request, though unusual, had opened a door she didn't know existed, and Jake, the man she had only just met, was walking through it with her, willing to see what lay beyond. They returned inside, sitting by the small fire that Clara had built in the hearth. The flames flickered warmly, and the room seemed to shrink, enclosing them in a private world separate from the dangers and judgments of the town outside. Here, for a few hours, they could simply be two people finding comfort in honesty and companionship. As the night deepened, their conversation grew more personal. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and the small things that made life worth living. Clara told Jake about her garden, the way flowers could bloom even after neglect, and how tending to them gave her a sense of purpose. Jake shared stories of sunsets over wide plains, the quiet satisfaction of a job done well, and the simple joy of watching a horse run free. They laughed softly, too. It was not the loud, carefree laughter of young children or the boisterous laughter of townsfolk at a saloon. It was gentle, sincere laughter that came from shared understanding and the comfort of finding someone who could listen without judgment. Clara realized how long it had been since she had laughed like that, truly and freely, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Hours passed, and the night wore on. Neither of them felt rushed, nor did they feel the need to fill the space with unnecessary words. There was a calmness to the silence, a recognition that sometimes simply being present with another person was enough. Clara felt her heart open in a way she had not allowed for years, and Jake felt the solitude he had carried for so long begin to lift, replaced by something quiet but profound. At one point, Clara looked at Jake and smiled softly. I never expected this night to feel like this, she admitted. I thought it would be practical, maybe awkward, but instead it feels honest. Real. Safe. Jake nodded, understanding her completely. Life has a way of surprising us, he said quietly. We plan and prepare, but sometimes the moments that matter the most are the ones we don't expect. This feels like one of those moments. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the sky, Clara and Jake sat together in comfortable silence, the fire now just glowing embers. The night had been long, but it had passed without fear, without judgment, and without the need for pretense. They had shared stories, laughter, and quiet understanding. They had found a connection, born not out of romance or desire, but out of honesty, respect, and the courage to face life together, even if only for a short time. Clara realized that the one-night marriage, which had seemed so pragmatic and unusual at the start, had become something more. It was not love in the traditional sense, but it was a deep, human connection that mattered more than either of them could have anticipated. She had stepped into the night seeking safety and practicality, and yet she had found trust, understanding, and the rare gift of being truly seen. Jake, too, felt the impact of the night. He had approached Clara's request with caution and practicality, but he had not expected to find such sincerity, such courage, or such warmth. The night had shown him that connection could be found even in the most unexpected circumstances, and that trust and honesty could create something meaningful, even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Clara and Jake had shared an experience that would linger in their hearts long after the practicalities of the night had passed. They had taken a risk, stepped into something uncertain, and emerged with a bond that neither had anticipated. It was a night that had started as a simple arrangement, yet had become a moment of transformation for both of them. As the light of morning filtered through the windows, Clara and Jake prepared to face the day. They knew that the world outside the cabin was full of challenges and expectations, but they also knew that they had discovered something precious. The night had revealed the strength of honesty, the power of courage, and the quiet beauty of human connection. And though their arrangement was meant to last only hours, its impact would be felt far beyond the confines of that small cabin, shaping the way they would move forward in a world that often demanded resilience, trust, and hope. For Clara, the night had been a revelation. She had entered it seeking safety and practicality, but she had found empathy, understanding, and the beginning of a bond that could change the way she saw herself and the possibilities of life. For Jake, The night had shown him that even in a life of wandering in solitude, there were moments that mattered, moments that could shift the heart and open the mind to new perspectives. And so, as the first birds began to sing and the town slowly awakened to a new day, Clara and Jake stood together at the edge of the cabin, knowing that their lives had been altered in subtle but profound ways. The one-night marriage had fulfilled its practical purpose, yes, but it had also revealed something deeper, a connection born of trust, honesty, and courage, a connection that neither of them would forget. In the quiet moments before the sun fully rose, they shared a look of understanding, a silent acknowledgement that what had begun as a practical arrangement had become something much more meaningful. And though the night was over, its lessons and its impact would stay with them, shaping the way they faced the world and each other in the days to come. The morning light streamed through the small windows of Clara's cabin, warm and golden, and yet the day felt heavier than the night before. The small town outside had already begun to stir. Horses clopped along the dusty roads, shop doors creaked open, and the faint murmur of townsfolk reached Clara's ears even through the cabin walls. Life went on as usual for everyone else, but for Clara and Jake, the consequences of the night they had shared were about to arrive. Clara stood by the window, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The comfort and safety of the night had faded into the harsh realities of the morning. While their one-night marriage had brought a sense of security and trust within the cabin, the town outside was a different matter entirely. Rumors traveled quickly in small towns, and the unusual nature of her request, marriage for one night, would not escape notice. Clara had to prepare herself for whispers, curious stares, and perhaps even criticism. She drew a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Survival in the Wild West required courage, and today she would need it more than ever. Jake had saddled his horse outside, adjusting the worn leather straps and checking the reins with careful precision. He had spent many mornings preparing for the day ahead, but today felt different. Something in the air carried tension, a quiet warning that life in the West often had a way of testing those who thought they were safe. He had grown accustomed to facing threats alone, but now he realized that his presence in Clara's life even briefly meant he had responsibilities that could not be ignored. When he stepped inside the cabin, Clara noticed the change in his expression. Jake's eyes, which had been warm and calm the night before, now held a sharp alertness, a readiness to respond to whatever danger might come their way. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. I don't know what yet, but I can feel it." Clara nodded, sensing the unease herself. The night had brought them closer, yes, but it had also put them in a position where they could no longer rely solely on privacy and safety. They had become connected in ways that could draw attention, and attention in the wrong hands could be dangerous. She felt a mixture of fear and determination. She had asked for this protection, for this bond, and now she would face whatever consequences it brought. It was not long before the first sign appeared. A rider appeared at the edge of town, moving quickly and with purpose. Clara and Jake watched from the cabin window, the figure becoming clearer as he approached. His expression was hard, his eyes filled with determination, and there was a tension in his body that suggested trouble. Jake immediately recognized him as a rival from a nearby town, a man with a reputation for holding grudges. Something in his posture, the way he rode, and the intensity in his gaze told Jake that this was no casual visit. "They've come," Jake said, his voice low but steady. He moved to Clara's side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, we face it together, you and I for as long as we need to." Clara's heart raced, but she found strength in his words. Trusting Jake in that moment felt natural, almost instinctive. She had relied on her own instincts for so long, but now she realized that having someone dependable beside her could make all the difference. She nodded firmly, meeting his gaze with equal resolve. "Together," she said. The rider dismounted near the cabin, his boots crunching against the dry dirt. His presence was imposing, and the tension in the air became almost tangible. Clara and Jake stepped outside, facing the threat head-on. The man's gaze moved between them, suspicion and anger flashing in his eyes. He had heard the rumors of the unusual marriage, and he had come with the intent of stirring trouble, perhaps out of jealousy, perhaps to assert dominance. "Jake," the man called, his voice sharp and commanding. "I hear you've been causing trouble in town. Thought I should pay you a visit." Jake's posture was calm but firm. He had faced conflicts before, and he knew that confrontation required both strength and clarity. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said evenly, "but I won't back down from what's rightfully mine, and I protect those who are under my care." The man sneered, taking a step closer. "Under your care? What do you mean?" His eyes flicked to Clara, a mix of curiosity and malice in his expression. "This woman, what's she to you?" Clara stepped forward slightly, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. "She's a woman who asked for my protection," Jake said firmly. "I will not allow anyone to threaten her. That's what she is to me. Nothing more, nothing less." The rival's expression darkened. He had expected compliance, perhaps even fear, and instead found defiance. Tension hung heavy in the air, and Clara realized just how dangerous life could be in the Wild West. Yet, she also felt a surge of confidence. She had entered this unusual arrangement seeking safety, and now she understood that courage and readiness were just as important as trust and honesty. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing the man's movements. The rival was skilled, perhaps dangerous, but he was not reckless. Jake knew he had to act carefully, protecting Clara without escalating the situation unnecessarily. He moved subtly, positioning himself between Clara and the threat. "If you want trouble," he said calmly, "you'll find none here. Leave now, and no harm will come to anyone." The man laughed, a harsh, cold sound. "Leave? I don't think so. I've come for answers, and I'll get them one way or another." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she stood firm beside Jake. The fear was there, yes, but so was determination. She had survived hardships before, and now she faced a challenge that demanded both courage and composure. She could see Jake's mind working, calculating every possible move, and she trusted him completely. Together, they were not just a widow and a cowboy, they were a team. The confrontation did not escalate into violence immediately. Instead, it became a tense standoff, each person waiting for the other to make a move. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a whisper of uncertainty, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting harsh shadows that mirrored the unease in Clara's heart. She understood that survival in the Wild West was often a matter of timing, strategy, and courage, and she drew upon every ounce of her strength to remain steady. Minutes passed like hours, each second stretching as tension built. Clara and Jake spoke softly, coordinating silently, ready to act if necessary. The rival shifted his weight, testing the resolve of the pair before him, but Jake remained unflinching. Clara felt a deep sense of admiration for him, for the calm strength he displayed, and for the way he treated her not as a burden, but as a person deserving of protection and respect. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the rival made a subtle retreat, realizing that neither threats nor intimidation would sway Jake. With a last glare, he mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Clara and Jake standing together in the quiet aftermath. The tension slowly drained from their bodies, replaced by relief, and the realization that they had survived yet another challenge. Clara exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the morning lift slightly. She had faced fear and uncertainty, yet she had done so with courage, trust, and the support of someone who had proven dependable in the face of danger. Jake looked at her, a faint smile breaking through the intensity of the moment. "We're not out of the woods," he said, "but we handled that together, and that counts for something." Clara nodded, her own smile tentative but genuine. She understood that life would continue to test them, that the Wild West was full of unpredictability, and that trust and courage would remain essential. Yet she also understood something more profound. Connection, even in difficult circumstances, could create strength and resilience beyond what she had imagined. As the day went on, Clara and Jake worked together to reinforce her cabin and secure her home. They discussed strategies for dealing with the town, for handling rumors, and for ensuring that their unusual arrangement did not bring unnecessary trouble. Each task, though practical, carried a deeper lesson in partnership, trust, and the quiet power of working together toward a common goal. By evening, both Clara and Jake had learned much about each other, not just the stories they had shared during the night, but the character revealed through action, courage, and composure. They had faced danger, navigated uncertainty, and emerged stronger, more connected, and more aware of the possibilities that life could offer when approached with honesty, bravery, and trust. The day had tested their bond, and it had survived. More than that, it had strengthened. Clara realized that the one-night marriage she had requested had grown into a deeper understanding of human connection, of courage, and of the resilience required to navigate a world that often demanded both. Jake understood that protecting someone did not mean controlling them. It meant respecting them, trusting them, and walking alongside them, even in uncertainty. As night fell once again over the small town, Clara and Jake sat quietly on the porch, watching the stars appear in the vast western sky. The events of the day lingered in their minds, but they also recognized the growth, understanding, and trust that had emerged from the challenges they had faced. Life in the Wild West was never simple, and it would continue to test them in ways they could not yet foresee. Yet together, they felt ready to face whatever came next. In that moment, under the infinite stars, They realized that courage, trust, and connection could carry them through any challenge, no matter how unexpected. Fate had tested them, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, they had learned that together they could navigate the trials of life, protect one another, and perhaps even find joy and meaning in the most unlikely of circumstances. Part 4 complete, approximately 1,300 words. This part focuses on external challenges and consequences, showing courage, trust, and teamwork while keeping the story exciting and wholesome. If you want, I can now expand Part 5, the concluding part, where choices and outcomes give the story a satisfying, emotional, and hopeful ending, in the same style and length. Do you want me to continue with Part 5? Part 5? Expand K-row without heading 1,300 words. In simple English words, it should be interesting and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. And don't use any violated word. Avioed any violated content? Absolutely! Here's Part 5 expanded to around 1,300 words in simple engaging English, bringing Clara and Jake's story to a satisfying, emotional, and hopeful conclusion, wholesome and dramatic. The sun rose slowly over the small western town, casting a soft golden light across the dusty streets and wooden buildings. The morning was quiet, the air filled with the faint sound of horses moving, and the gentle murmur of townsfolk beginning their daily routines. Clara stood at the edge of her porch, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and took a deep breath. The events of the past few days, the unusual proposal, the night of connection, and the dangers they had faced were still fresh in her mind. She thought about her life before Jake had arrived, the loneliness and fear she had carried, and the sense of vulnerability that had accompanied her every step. Now, everything felt different. The night they had shared, the bond they had built, and the courage they had shown together had changed her. She was still the same woman who had lost her husband, but she had grown stronger, more confident, and more certain that she could face whatever life threw her way. Jake joined her on the porch, adjusting the brim of his hat and glancing at the town with careful eyes. He had spent years traveling alone, learning to rely only on himself, but over the past few days he had discovered something new, something he had long thought impossible. Trust and connection, even fleeting, could bring strength and meaning to life. Clara had shown him that, and he was grateful for it. "You ready for the day?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying a hint of warmth. Clara smiled softly. "I think so," she replied. "But it feels strange, knowing that everything might change today." Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Their one-night arrangement had created ripples in the town, changing how people looked at them and how they looked at themselves. Some townsfolk whispered behind closed doors, while others watched from a distance, curious and cautious. The arrangement that had begun as a practical solution had now left both Clara and Jake facing choices that would shape the future. The first challenge came sooner than they expected. A group of townsfolk, drawn by curiosity and the rumors that had begun to spread, approached Clara's cabin. Their expressions were a mixture of suspicion, amusement, and concern. Clara felt a pang of anxiety, but Jake stepped forward, placing himself slightly ahead of her. His presence was calm but protective, a reminder that she was not alone. Clara greeted the townsfolk politely, her voice steady despite the tension she felt. "Good morning," she said. "I know there are questions, but I ask for your understanding. What you heard is true, but it was a practical decision, not something meant to scandalize anyone." Some of the townsfolk nodded, their expressions softening as they recognized her honesty. Others whispered among themselves, clearly trying to make sense of the unusual situation. Clara realized that the challenge of judgment would not disappear immediately, but she also understood that honesty, courage, and composure could carry her through. She did not need approval from everyone. She only needed to maintain her dignity and integrity. Jake spoke calmly to the townsfolk, reinforcing Clara's words. "We did what was necessary to protect her and to respect each other. There's nothing more to it. Life in this town can be difficult, and sometimes decisions must be made to ensure safety and respect. That's what we've done." The words carried weight. People listened, and slowly, tension began to ease. Rumors could not easily harm those who faced the world with courage and honesty, and Clara felt a sense of quiet pride. She had faced judgment, fear, and uncertainty, and had come through with her head held high. Jake's presence had made that possible, but the strength had also been her own. As the day progressed, Clara and Jake worked together to rebuild routines and return to a sense of normalcy. They tended to her small garden, repaired a broken fence, and even shared a few quiet moments of laughter over minor mishaps. These simple acts were powerful. They reminded them both that life could carry joy even in the aftermath of challenges. Each task, each conversation strengthened the bond that had begun in the unusual circumstances of the night before. By evening, the town seemed to accept them, or at least to respect their choices. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a cautious understanding. Clara realized that the one-night marriage had done more than protect her. It had also demonstrated her courage and independence. She was not just a widow surviving day by day. She was a woman capable of making difficult decisions, facing consequences, and standing with integrity in the face of judgment. Jake, too, reflected on the experience. He had come into Clara's life as a stranger, drawn perhaps by curiosity, but he had found much more than a simple arrangement. He had discovered trust, connection, and the rare experience of standing with someone in complete honesty. He realized that the Wild West, with all its dangers and unpredictability, could also offer moments of profound human connection, if only one was willing to face life with courage and respect. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara and Jake stood together outside the cabin. The stars began to twinkle, and the quiet of the town offered a sense of peace. They had faced fear, rumors, and challenges, yet they had come through stronger, wiser, and more aware of the value of trust and connection. Clara looked at Jake and smiled, a soft expression of gratitude and warmth. "I didn't expect any of this," she said. "I thought it would be practical, maybe even awkward, but instead it feels like something meaningful. Something I didn't know I needed." "Life has a way of surprising us," he replied. "We plan, we prepare, but sometimes the moments that matter most are the ones we don't expect. You've shown me that, Clara. You've shown me that trust, courage, and honesty can make even a brief connection feel profound." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The journey that had begun with a simple practical request had grown into something far greater, a bond built on respect, understanding, and shared courage. She realized that life in the Wild West was unpredictable, often harsh, but it could also carry moments of beauty and connection that were worth holding on to. They spent the evening quietly, sharing stories, observing the night sky, and appreciating the calm after the challenges they had faced. It was a night without urgency, without fear, and without expectation beyond the simple comfort of companionship. They laughed softly at shared memories from the day, reflected on lessons learned, and considered what the future might hold. As darkness settled fully over the town, Clara felt a sense of completion. The one-night marriage had fulfilled its purpose. It had protected her, strengthened her, and allowed her to face life with renewed confidence. But it had also given her something unexpected, a glimpse of trust, connection, and partnership that could exist even in a world that often seemed lonely and unforgiving. Jake, too, understood the significance of the night. He had entered the arrangement cautiously, prepared for the practicalities, and yet he had discovered the value of honesty, respect, and human connection. He realized that life did not always have to be solitary, that trust could be earned and shared, and that even brief experiences could leave lasting impressions on the heart. By the time the stars shone fully in the night sky, Clara and Jake stood together in quiet reflection. They did not speak, for words were unnecessary. Their bond, formed through courage, honesty, and shared experience, had grown stronger than any words could express. They understood that life would continue to test them, but they also knew that together they could face whatever came next. As the night deepened, Clara and Jake prepared to rest, knowing that the morning would bring new challenges and new choices. Yet they were not afraid. The events of the past days had shown them that courage, trust, and connection could carry them through difficulties, and that life, even in the unpredictable Wild West, could offer moments of hope, meaning, and understanding. In the quiet moments before sleep, Clara reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple, bold request. She had entered it seeking safety and practicality, yet she had found strength, courage, and connection that went far beyond what she had imagined. Jake, too, understood that the night had changed him, teaching him the power of trust, the importance of respect, and the rare beauty of human connection. Though the one-night marriage was meant to be brief, its impact would last far longer. It had given them both lessons in courage, resilience, and the quiet joy of shared understanding. Life in the Wild West remained uncertain, full of challenges and unexpected twists, but Clara and Jake had discovered that together they could face whatever came, protect one another, and carry hope into the future. As they drifted into sleep, the stars above the cabin shone brightly, a reminder that even in a world of dust, danger, and uncertainty, light could be found and connections could endure. The one-night marriage had ended, but the bond it created, built on trust, courage, and honesty, would remain with them forever, guiding their choices, shaping their future, and reminding them both that even fleeting moments could leave lasting marks on the heart.